Welcome to Serial Napper, the bedtime podcast for people who fall asleep to true crime. This episode gets dark, so if you're sensitive to graphic content, maybe skip the nightcap. You've been warned. Hey everyone, my name is Nikki Young, and this is Serial Napper, the true crime podcast for naps. I'm back with another true crime story to lull you to sleep, or perhaps to give you nightmares. This is episode 3 of another season of Serial Nightmare, a Halloween series that I do every year for the month of October. So everything I release this month will either be Halloween related or a little bit more on the spooky side, but of course, always true crime. It's Halloween night 2004. Jack-o'-lanterns glow on front porches, candy wrappers litter the floor. Napa Valley, California's wine country darling, is quiet and calm, as was typical. This was the kind of place where people actually still left their doors unlocked. Before that night, the town hadn't seen a murder in over 2 years. People here believed that sort of thing just happened elsewhere. But that illusion was about to be shattered. Inside one cozy home, 3 roommates had turned in for the night after a chill Halloween evening. They'd handed out candy, laughed, and locked the doors safely, or so they thought. But somewhere in the dark, someone was watching them. Before the sun came up, 2 of those women, 26-year-old Adriane Insogna and Lesley-Ann Mazzara, would be brutally murdered. Their 3rd roommate, Lauren, would live to tell the story, though she'd never sleep the same way again. "I thought I was in a horror movie," she later said. And honestly, she wasn't wrong. For nearly a year, police had no idea who the killer was. There wasn't any forced entry, no signs of a robbery, no clear motive, just a town fearful of the unknown and the possibility that maybe the murderer wasn't an outsider. Maybe it was one of them, living amongst them, standing behind them at the grocery store, shaking their hand at church. When the truth finally came out, no one, not the victims' friends, not their families, not even the cops, could believe who it was hiding behind the mask. So, dim the lights, put your phone down, and listen to the story of the Napa Halloween murders, an evening where the horror was supposed to be fun, playful, and pretend. Instead, the town was shaken by a real-life nightmare. So, let's jump right in. Napa Valley isn't exactly the kind of place you move to if you're chasing excitement. It's wine country, meaning quiet streets, boutique shops, and locals who smile like they've got nowhere better to be. Back in 2004, it was almost aggressively peaceful. The population hovered around 75,000 people, and there hadn't been a single homicide in 2 years. So, when 3 ambitious single women in their mid-20s decided to share a Tudor-style rental on Dorset Street, it looked like a Pinterest board come to life. A cozy house, safe neighborhood, and all the promise of adulthood neatly packaged behind a white picket fence. There was Lauren, 27, an all-state athlete with a political science degree who'd settled into coaching volleyball at a community college. She was the grounded one, the make sure the doors are locked type. Then there was Adriane, 26, a civil engineer for the city's sanitation district. Smart, driven, and tougher than most people realized. In high school, Adriane had nearly died in a car crash that left her battling through months of recovery. But she didn't let it slow her down. She got a scholarship to Cal Poly, earned her degree, and built a life that she loved. She played volleyball, volunteered, and was even planning a trip to visit her sister in Australia. By early 2004, Adriane and Lauren had become close friends. Movie nights, gym sessions, inside jokes. That summer, the household gained a third roommate, Leslie Ann Mazzara. Leslie was everything that her southern roots promised. Bubbly, charming, and effortlessly magnetic. A former beauty queen from South Carolina who'd moved west for a fresh start after a breakup. She had taken a job greeting guests at one of the local wineries, and she was really good at it. Her mom, Kathy, used to say Leslie was a princess through and through. She was the type who got pretty much whatever she wanted and was known to maybe break a few hearts while she was at it. Leslie was fun, flirty, and ready to start over after a toxic relationship, meaning she was happily dating around, as is common for single girls her age. She knew what she was looking for, and she wasn't going to stop until she found it. She wasn't willing to just settle for anyone. Together, the three women were the perfect mix: the athlete, the engineer, and the beauty queen. They decorated their home like something out of a lifestyle magazine. The neighbors adored them. They hosted barbecues, handed out Halloween candy, and left their porch lights on late. October 31st, 2004 was no different. By early evening on Halloween night, Lauren was finally back home at 2631 Dorset Street in Napa. It had been a long Sunday, soccer in the morning, errands all afternoon, and all she wanted now was to kick off her shoes and relax. A stuffed witch dangled from the porch, a friendly sign for trick-or-treaters that this was one of those houses. Candy guaranteed. Inside, her roommates, Adriane and Leslie, were already in full Halloween spirit, greeting every knock at the door with smiles and playful shrieks. The candy bowl was emptying fast, but they didn't care. Each costumed kid that came up to the walkway just added to the fun. Lauren wasn't quite as into it. It wasn't the kids, it was her aging dog, Chloe, who had a habit of barking her head off every time the doorbell rang. Adriane and Leslie thought that it was hilarious, but Lauren was counting down the minutes until the last goblin showed up. By 9 o'clock, the trick-or-treat traffic had died down. The women weren't planning to go out. Monday morning meant work, and Napa wasn't exactly famous for its nightlife anyway. They preferred quiet nights in to crowded bars with the same handful of faces. That evening, Adriane mentioned that she was going to stop by her boyfriend, Christian Lee's house, which was about a block away. Lauren stayed behind to eat a late dinner with Leslie joining her in the kitchen. They eventually settled in the living room with a DVD of 6 Feet Under, watching an episode and then chatting until around 9:30 p.m. when Lauren got a phone call and slipped into her downstairs room. Leslie said goodnight a little while later, heading upstairs to her bedroom. Around that same time, Leslie's phone rang again. It was a man named Lee Youngblood Sr., the father of an ex-boyfriend from South Carolina. He'd been calling her more often lately, too often. Friends said that she'd grown uncomfortable with how persistent he had become, even after her breakup with his son. So that night, she decided to just let it ring. By 10:30 p.m., Adriane was back from Christian's place. She stopped to chat briefly with Lauren before heading upstairs. She was tired but happy, still thinking about the weekend she'd spent with Christian. Before turning off the lights, she sent him one last text message that read, "Thank you for yesterday. It was one of the best days ever. I wish it could be forever." Downstairs in her room, Lauren did her usual nighttime routine. She let Chloe out, checked the doors, locked the sliding glass one that was sometimes left open. The only thing she didn't check were the windows. It was a safe neighborhood. There wasn't really any reason to. By 11:30 p.m., the house on Dorset Street was quiet. 3 women, 3 locked doors, and one false sense of safety. Sometime after 2 a.m., the stillness of Napa shattered. The sound of breaking glass, muffled screams, and then silence. The perfect little Napa life was over. Leslie and Adriane were tucked away in their upstairs bedrooms, and Lauren asleep downstairs with her golden retriever, Chloe, curled up at her feet. Around 2 a.m., the motion light outside flicked on. Lauren stirred, but didn't think much of it. Napa wasn't the kind of place where you feared the dark. She figured maybe one of her roommates had company, something as harmless as a boyfriend sneaking in for a late-night visit. Then came the sound of breaking glass and a blood-curdling scream that would make the hairs on the back of your arm stand up. Lauren shot upright, heart hammering. For a moment, she just listened, trying to understand what she was hearing. Then she heard Adriane's voice from upstairs, desperate and terrified. "Please, God, help me. Somebody help me." Suddenly, there was the sound of heavy footsteps pounding down the stairs. Whoever was in the house was moving fast, right towards her. Instinct took over. Lauren bolted for the back door, barefoot, shaking, Chloe barking behind her. She burst into the backyard, half expecting the intruder to chase her out. Instead, she heard the sound of a window creaking open. The killer was leaving the very same way he came in. Next, there was silence. When everything finally went still, Lauren crept back inside. The house was completely quiet now. She tried to call 911, but the cordless phone was dead, unplugged, or disabled. She didn't really know. When she went upstairs, she found a nightmare waiting for her. Leslie lay motionless in a pile of clothes, stabbed again and again, the blood pooling thick and dark beneath her. Adriane was nearby, still alive, but fading fast, her eyes open but unseeing. In the chaos of trying to run to their side, Lauren slipped, her feet sliding in what she realized was her friend's blood. Panic swallowed her whole. She ran for her car, terrified that the killer might still be nearby, and called 911 from her cell phone in the front seat. By the time officers arrived, it was too late. Adriane, Insogna, and Leslie Mazzara were gone. Their friends and family were utterly horrified that someone had so violently taken their lives. The community was shaken to the core, and they held vigils in honor of the young women. Adriane's best friend, Lily, pleaded in the media for anyone with any information to step forward. She said, "Somebody must have seen something. Somebody out there knows something. Somebody would have to notice a friend of theirs acting strange. It's important. It's important to find out who did this and to find out why. In some sick way, I want to know. I want to know how it happened. I mean, this is my friend. I want to know what happened to her." Lily was furious that months would pass with no arrest. She was convinced that the killer's behavior couldn't have gone unnoticed by those around him. She clung to one small hope, that during the struggle, Adriane had fought back hard enough to leave him wounded. As the investigation dragged on, rumors spread like wildfire. Lily remembered hearing every outlandish theory imaginable, whispers that the women were mixed up in drugs or that they'd crossed someone dangerous. She knew none of it was true, but gossip like this, it filled the silence where answers should have been. When Lily spoke about seeing Adriane's body at the funeral, her voice cracked. "It looked like she fought so hard," she said softly. Adriane's arms were covered in bruises, her hands marked with defensive cuts. She hated turtlenecks, absolutely refused to wear them, Lily added, but she was buried in one for obvious reasons. Now, at the scene of the crime in the house, there was no sign of forced entry. There wasn't a robbery, didn't appear that anything was stolen. Just brutality, rage. Blood was found smeared on blinds and walls. Drops trailed near a broken window, proof that the killer had cut himself during the attack. Outside, investigators found cigarette butts, Camel Turkish golds. They were discarded near the house. Was the killer hanging around outside trying to drum up the courage to go through with it? Were they watching the women in the dark long before the attack? Police bagged everything. 71 pieces of evidence in total. DNA, fingerprints, footprints. But again, there were no suspects. and there didn't appear to be a motive, just a town that suddenly didn't feel safe anymore. Napa hadn't seen a double homicide since 1998. That changed in one night, and the monster who did it had vanished back into the dark. Now, as we know with potential suspects, police always start with the inner circle. Statistically speaking, the monster is almost always someone that you already know, and in Leslie's case, that list was long. Leslie had many admirers, lots of them. She had that kind of effortless magnetism, the kind that could make men do things that they probably shouldn't. One of them was Brian West, a college boyfriend who once bought her a car after just a few months of dating. Yeah, a car. Call it devotion or call it delusion. Even after the breakup, Brian couldn't let go. He built a whole website about her, a tribute page, as if she'd died when she was very much alive. Leslie's friend Amy said it never struck her as scary, just Brian being Brian. He idolized her, she said, which is exactly the kind of sentence that makes detectives' ears perk up. Then there was William Lee Youngblood Jr., a lawyer Leslie had lived with before she moved to Napa. Their relationship ended, but Leslie had told friends she'd once imagined marrying him if it weren't for his father, because apparently William Lee Youngblood Sr. couldn't quite grasp the concept of boundaries. He'd call the house often, sometimes multiple times a day, asking for Leslie, not his son, Leslie. Amy said it reached a point where Leslie just stopped answering. When Napa detectives told Amy that Youngblood Sr. had called Leslie twice on Halloween night, she said her hair stood on end. And yeah, same. Police actually flew all the way to South Carolina to question him. He denied everything, insisting that the calls were just an unfortunate coincidence, and both he and his son provided DNA samples. Neither was a match. So, creepy? Sure. Guilty? Apparently not. Back in Napa, detectives continued the grind. Every man Leslie had met, flirted with, or dated got swabbed. They filled evidence bags with saliva samples and paperwork, but each test came back clean. At the time of her death, Leslie had been dating two men, both local. Her college friends Katie and Vanessa remembered visiting her a few weeks before the murders, and both had felt something was kind of off with one of those boyfriends. They told police about a night at a Napa bar when a harmless male friend came over to say hello to Leslie, and her date's whole energy shifted. He seemed possessive and angry, that suffocating kind of jealousy that makes you want to leave your drink unfinished and just go home by yourself. After the murders, that moment haunted them. But even that guy's DNA, it came back negative. Detectives started to wonder if maybe Leslie hadn't been the target after all. Maybe the violence wasn't about her. Maybe it was about Adriane. One of the names that kept surfacing was Christian Lee, Adriane's on-again, off-again boyfriend. According to her best friend, Lily, Adriane's relationship with him wasn't exactly peaceful. Lily said Adriane sometimes came into work in tears. Things were messy, maybe even toxic. Christian later described the morning that police came knocking like something out of a crime show. He said he was jolted awake, opened the door, and suddenly found himself staring at a half circle of detectives who instinctively stepped back. They immediately asked him whether he kept any weapons in the house, and Christian told them that, yeah, he did, just one. When he offered to retrieve it, they cut him off. No, just point to it. Officers seized a knife, his bedsheets, some of his clothes, and they drew blood for testing before hauling him in for questioning. Christian admitted that, yeah, he'd seen Adriane the night that she died. She stopped by his place, but she left at around 10 to go home. He told investigators that their relationship had been kind of strained lately. They'd been arguing, mostly about commitment. Adriane wanted more stability, but he wasn't ready to give it to her. She'd even told him that she met someone new, and if he couldn't step up, well, she would move on. For a while, Christian was their prime suspect. The timeline, the tension, the proximity, it all fit too neatly. But when the DNA results came back, his name was cleared. The blood at the scene didn't belong to him, and nothing else tied him to the murders. Another sample, another test, another dead end. By now, detectives were drowning in DNA, theories, and coffee that didn't seem to help them any. They'd ruled out about half of the male population of Napa, but the truth was still hiding somewhere close. So close, it was practically breathing down their necks. And the scariest part, the killer had walked among them the whole time, smiling through grief, pretending to be part of the circle of mourners. In September of 2005, a lab tech called with news that made everyone sit up straight. Remember those Camel Turkish gold cigarette butts found outside of the house? Well, the DNA on them matched the killer's blood inside of the home. Finally, after months of waiting, they had something real, something that could break the case wide open. Police released this information to the public, hoping someone could connect the dots. And apparently, someone did. Within days, a pair of parents in Napa opened their mail to find suicide letters from their son. He confessed that he was the killer. The man who'd stabbed 2 women to death on Halloween night was planning to end his own life, but his family stopped him. They convinced him to turn himself in instead. His name was Eric Koppel, 26 years old, a quiet, unassuming land surveyor. No criminal record, no violent history. And the gut punch? He was married to Lily, Adriane's best friend. Yeah, that Lily, the one who'd spent months grieving, attending memorials, and demanding justice for one of her best friends. Her husband was the very reason Adriane was dead. When the news broke, the entire town reeled. Eric had been there through it all, crying at both funerals, comforting families, hugging victims' parents. Even Adriane's mother, Arlene, had read scriptures at his wedding just a few months earlier. The betrayal was staggering. The date that the girls were murdered had a haunting connection to the killer. On November 1st, 2004, Lily and Eric, they were actually supposed to be getting married that day, but they had decided to postpone their wedding. This was the very same day that Adriane was murdered. If the wedding had gone ahead, Adriane and Lauren would have been in Hawaii with her that week. Instead, Lily's best friend was killed by her husband-to-be while she was still planning the ceremony. It was a weird and wild connection. When police questioned Eric, he cracked. He confessed to entering the women's home that night, cutting the phone lines, and attacking them both in a blind rage. He said he stabbed them, panicked, and then he fled out the window. His motive? Jealousy and resentment. He hated the influence that Adriane had over Lily, her independence, her strength, the bond that they shared. He wanted control, and when he couldn't get it, he chose annihilation. Later, Eric wrote an apology letter, more of a coward's confession than anything else, saying he was haunted by the evil he'd done and calling himself a coward. Well, he wasn't wrong about that last part. The small, peaceful world of Napa had been torn apart by someone who looked like the boy next door. The killer hadn't come from the shadows. He'd been sitting at the dinner table, smiling in family photos and mourning the women that he had slaughtered. It doesn't get more hidden in plain sight than that. When the truth finally came out, people couldn't stop asking 2 questions. How could he, and how didn't anyone know? Eric Koppel had been right there the entire time, living and working in Napa, showing up to the vigils, hugging the families, holding Lily as she wept. Police had collected DNA from more than 200 men, yet somehow they skipped over the quiet, church-going fiancé of Adriane's best friend. Even after his confession, Adriane's mother, Arlene, couldn't wrap her head around the why. What could possibly make someone like Eric, soft-spoken, shy, kind of polite, explode into something so monstrous? According to the district attorney, the answer was buried in his relationship with Lily. Eric wanted control. He wanted her all to himself. And on Halloween night, the night that was supposed to have been their wedding day, things fell apart. Lily refused to spend the night with him after an argument, and Eric was left stewing in his anger, drinking alone, feeling his grip on her slipping away. He told police he remembered bits and pieces about that night. He went to a party that Halloween evening, and he was heavily intoxicated. He and Lily had a fight, but she was nice enough to drive him home, where he passed out. He remembered waking up later that night, leaving the house, grabbing a knife and some zip ties, smoking a cigarette outside the women's home. He claimed he didn't know why he had gone to the women's home or why he had brought those specific items with him, but then he claimed everything from there just went completely blank. What he did next was robotic and, according to him, out of his control. He said he used his knife to pry open a window so he could get inside. He went upstairs and walked into Adriane's bedroom, where she was sleeping. He laid down in a pile of clothing that was on her floor. Suddenly, she woke up, turning on the light and startling Eric. He jumped on top of her and she began hitting him in the face, but he says he completely blacked out after that. He remembered hearing screaming coming from another room, and he said he remembered getting up and walking to that room, but he didn't recall much else. How convenient. When it was over, he said he burned his clothes in his backyard fire pit, but he insisted he couldn't remember what happened to the knife. The kind of selective amnesia only killers seem to get. In 2006, faced with overwhelming DNA evidence, Eric Koppel struck a deal. He pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder in order to avoid the death penalty. It spared the families of a drawn-out trial, but it didn't spare anyone the heartbreak. The courtroom that day was packed wall to wall. Reporters, family, friends, even former neighbors who couldn't believe what they were seeing. Lily sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she faced the man she called her husband. Arlene Allen, Adriane's mom, finally had her chance to speak. She stood up, voice shaking but strong, and said, "Eric, you knew Adriane, you knew me, and I know you. You are the man who violently stabbed to death the best friend of the woman you loved. That is not love, Eric. You cannot love Lily and bring a knife into Adriane's home and stab her again and again and again." She counted each again. The room was silent except for the sound of people crying. When Lily took the stand, she was allowed to speak on her husband's behalf. Her words were complicated. Part apology, part farewell, part something else entirely. She said, "I wish with all my heart these events had been avoided." Then she turned to Eric and said, "There is nothing you could do to make me love you any less." The families in that courtroom were stunned. After everything, she stood there saying she still loved him. Maybe she was still in shock. Maybe she couldn't face the truth just yet. We don't know. Finally, it was Eric's turn to speak. He read a statement through tears, calling himself a broken man and admitting that he'd been consumed by jealousy, fear, and darkness. He said, "I was afraid my relationship with Lily, the singular ray of light in my black world, was in peril of collapsing." He claimed Adriane had poisoned Lily's feelings towards him. It was twisted logic, blaming the woman he murdered for his own insecurity. The judge handed down the only sentence that made sense: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Eric Koppel was led away in shackles while his wife sobbed. Adriane's mother glared, and Leslie's family clutched each other for strength. Leslie's mom later said it best: he was evil disguised as a friend. For a long time after the murders, Napa didn't feel like Napa anymore. People locked their doors for the first time in years. Porch lights stayed off that next Halloween. Parents double-checked every window before bed. The Napa Halloween murders shattered more than two families. They fractured an entire community's sense of safety. This wasn't the work of a stranger lurking in the vineyards. It was someone from within their circle, a man who'd smiled at the dinner tables and sent Christmas cards. For the families of Adriane Insogna and Leslie Mazzara, grief turned into something else: purpose. Adriane's family created a scholarship in her name to support young women pursuing engineering, carrying forward her dream of building things instead of breaking them. Leslie's loved ones established community programs and volunteer initiatives that celebrate her spirit, the bubbly, big-hearted woman who could light up a room. Now, Lauren, the roommate who survived, she's spent years trying to outrun that night. She once said that she still couldn't fall asleep in silence, that every creak, every soft sound after dark jolted her awake. Survival isn't the same as safety, and she's had to rebuild her life from the kind of fear most of us only imagine in nightmares. And then there's Lily. She lost her best friend and her husband in one horrifying revelation. The guilt, the betrayal, the questions that she'll never get answers to, those are her ghosts to carry. She didn't just lose people she loved, she lost the version of herself that believed she could tell the difference between love and danger. When news broke about her husband, Eric, being the killer, many wondered if she knew more than she was letting on. I mean, how could she not? She was married to him. She kissed him goodnight every evening in bed. But as far as the police go, they say that there's no indication she knew what her husband had done or what kind of monster he really was. Still, Lily struggled to move forward, with many people just turning their backs on her, blaming her for what had happened that Halloween night. As for Eric, he sits in a cell serving out a life sentence. No parole, no redemption, no real explanation. His so-called amnesia, well, it never convinced anyone. Every October, Napa remembers. The Halloween there has never felt quite the same. The glow of a jack-o'-lantern isn't charming anymore. It's a reminder of two bright lives snuffed out behind a white picket fence. It's easy to tell ourselves that monsters live in the dark, that if we just stay in the light, we're safe. But the truth is more uncomfortable. Sometimes the scariest part of any story isn't the killer lurking in the shadows. It's realizing that evil can come wrapped in familiarity, a friend's fiancé, a polite smile, a helping hand. The kind of evil that knows your house, your schedule, your laughter. Because the truth is, monsters don't always break in. Sometimes they already have a key. That's it for me tonight. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Serial Napper wherever you listen to podcasts. For ad-free early access and bonus episodes, join me over on Patreon at patreon.com/serialnapper. Until next time, stay safe, stay kind, and if your bestie is telling you that your man is toxic, maybe consider listening to them. Bye.